Just focus on two related questions. One is the reasons why Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal, and two, what are the likely consequences of this withdrawal? A few weeks ago in May, Trump, during his presidential campaign, having declared the deal as the worst deal ever the United States has made, fulfilled his promise of withdrawing from the agreement. This has started really a collision course between US and Iran, which could very well end up with sort of military confrontation as a result. And I'll get to that towards the end of my talk. But the withdrawal of the agreement was a very drastic move in terms of traditional history of diplomacy. Here was an agreement the United States had made, not just with Iran, but with the United Nations. It was an agreement between Iran and 5+1, the 5 being the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, being, of course, United States, Britain, France, Russia, China, +1 being Germany, because Germany was also very much involved in the whole issue of Iran. So this unilateral withdrawal was not just an act against Iran, but also a threat against the Europeans and also Russia and China. To compound the withdrawal, Trump also threatened to carry out major sanctions against Iran and also penalize financially any company, whether Russian, French, or European, or Chinese, that dealt with Iran. So it was a way of trying to isolate Iran from the international community as far as trade is concerned. Now, the reasons he gave for the withdrawal, avowed reasons, is something mentioned in the press or vaguely without actually dealing with the agreement itself. And Trump himself probably has not read the agreement, because at one point he said that the agreement would end in 7 years' time, and then Iran would have the liberty to develop a nuclear bomb. I don't know where he got this idea from, but if you read the actual agreement, which is very meticulous, it's over 100 pages, it's very precise. There are some sunset clauses in it. A few of the minor issues, there's a sunset 15 years, 25 years, but even after 25 years, actually, Iran would be still limited by the non-proliferation treaty it signed before. So this alarmist view that somehow as soon as the treaty ends, the limitations ends, Iran would have a carte blanche to develop a nuclear bomb is a complete, basically, mythology. Now, you find often actually people like Schumer, others complaining that the Obama's agreement was fine, except for there are some minor issues that should be dealt with. The one issue being this question of limitations. But if you look at it carefully, these limitations are not actually limited by 15 or 24 years. So it's a very alarmist view to say that, well, after a few years, Iran will have the absolute right to develop a nuclear bomb. But also, if you listened to Trump's speech when he withdrew, it's interesting, the nitty-gritty of it. In the speech, he doesn't talk about areas that the deal could be improved. He basically denounces the treaty, and the speech could be read as an explicit, basically, demand of surrender, unconditional surrender by Iran, or an implicit demand that it's a declaration of war. And maybe he hoped that this would have it be read in Iran as a declaration of war. Because there was no attempt to basically try to fine-tune the deal and say it's going to be a better deal. He says, I'm just withdrawing. If you then look at the pro-Trump press, but even the more responsible press over the last 10 years, they have managed to create an atmosphere of Iran as a major threat, as a major power, that it's actually has aspirations to build up a new empire like the old Persian Empire, reaching all the way from the Mediterranean to all the way to India. And they constantly talk about, well, the Iranians are fascinated by the old empire, and this is what they want to create, and this is what their ambitions are, and this is what they're going to do. Here we need a reality check, actually. If you look at the real military strength of Iran, it's pitiful. Iran has revolutionary guards, which are mostly like a national guard. They would be quite effective if a country invaded the country, but it has no outward capability. Iran's national budget per year for the military used to be $9 billion a year for the military. It's now increased to $14 billion a year for the military. The United Arab Emirates, a tiny sheikhdom, is a pumping station for the United States, spends $35 billion on its military. Saudi Arabia, our democratic ally, spends $95 billion a year. United States, of course, spends something like $700 billion. So here you have a midget Iran spending, let's say, $14 billion, is supposed to be a major threat to countries, neighboring countries that spend $95 billion. So to create this image of Iran as a major power, there's a lot of exaggeration put, and you find this, of course, in Trump's speech, that he ties any problem that exists in the Middle East, whether it's the Palestinian issue, whether it's Yemen, whether it's Syria, whether it's the Taliban in Afghanistan, to Iran, as if Iran is the mastermind of all these problems in it. So the view that is then created is, if you get rid of Iran, all these problems are going to be solved. This is very much reminiscent of the Iraqi situation. Although Trump criticized Bush about Iraq, or he claimed he did, the arguments constantly that are being used are very similar. It's like a leaf taken out of the Bush's book, of portraying now Iran, before it was Iraq, as a major threat, where the only threat Saddam Hussein had was to his own people. It was not a threat to anyone else. But the picture was portrayed that Saddam Hussein could destroy Manhattan with germ warfare in no time. Now the argument is that Trump actually cited that American cities could be destroyed by Iranian nuclear bombs. First of all, Iran, of course, doesn't have any nuclear bombs. It doesn't have the capability of having international missiles, but still this image is trying to be created in the United States that Iran is a major imminent threat, and that threat can directly affect the United States. So once you create that atmosphere and demonize the state, then of course it's easier then to move into more drastic action. Now the question becomes why this position is taken. Now I will venture 4 major reasons or pressures that explain this reversal or removal of it. One explanation often given is that, of course, Trump wants to undo all of Obama's achievements. And of course, Obamacare was his main achievement internally. In foreign policy, Obama's major achievement was actually the nuclear deal. And this is often stressed that this is basically the fixation of Trump, and this is why he is so adamant about it. I'm sure there is some truth in this, but I think this is more a convenient cover-up for more important reasons, and I'll get to it why this was convenient argument often used. Second reason, a much far more important reason, is basically the pressure from Israel. You can't understand US policy about Iran without putting the Israeli context in. When I say Israel, I'm talking about Bibi Netanyahu, not the whole of the Israeli political elite. Netanyahu has always denounced the agreement, and he always opposed actually Obama's dealings with Iran. His obsession about Obama was really about Iran, because for him, Obama, if he dealt with Iran, he was in fact undermining Israeli position in the Middle East. So even before the negotiations about the nuclear deal, he was adamant that there should be no deal. And Kerry has recently revealed that while he was negotiating, he was being constantly pestered by Bibi that he should end negotiations and instead bomb Iran. So that was his solution to how to deal with the situation. For Netanyahu, Iran's existence is what he called existential threat to Israel. Now, 27 leading generals in Israel, including some Mossad leaders, have actually signed this letter saying the nuclear deal was a good deal. And they actually supported the negotiations. So this is much more to do with Israeli politics, especially Likud versus opponents of Netanyahu about this issue. But Netanyahu has used this argument very much to appeal to the electorate in Israel as to show Iran, to depict Iran as an existential threat. And of course, Iran doesn't help sometimes by having demonstrations about death to Israel. That feeds into it. But these are mostly rhetorical statements in Iran, really, rather than serious policy decisions there. Now, added to the Israeli position, you also have in American politics major fundraisers, people like Adelson, owner of Home Depot, one important hedge fund manager, who have poured in more than $40 million for the Trump wing of the Republican Party. And all of these three people have had a long record of wanting to confront Iran. Adelson, in fact, in one time openly advocated that 8 million people in Tehran should be nuclear bombed by the United States. So he doesn't mince his words. He wants direct action, and he has a long record of this. And they have been very much behind opposing Obama and supporting Trump. There's an interesting article just this week in New Yorker that the main force that got Trump to move to accept Jerusalem as the capital of Israel wasn't so much Trump himself, but Edelson. Edelson insisted that this was something that had to be done basically to satisfy his Trump's promise to the pro-Likud, you could say, constituency in the United States. Now, the reason I would say that Trump's, the notion of Trump's obsession about Obama is convenient is again reminiscent of the Iraqi situation. If you go back to the Iraqi war, the people who most were adamant and were engineers of really the war were the pro-Likud neocons. But when it went sour, they quickly actually distanced themselves and said, oh, it was all due to Bush and Rumsfeld. They were the people behind it. And you even got them with a straight face saying, no, we didn't support the war. It was their ideas. So what you see now is that if there is things go sour, if there is a war, they can easily say, oh no, it was Trump's obsession about Obama that got you into the war. We had nothing to do with it. We were just observers. We even maybe advised you not to go along that road. So there is, I think, a very sort of cynical use of this argument of Obama's obsession to cover up the real force behind the confrontation. A third factor that is important is the Saudis plus the United Arab Emirates. They act now as a very effective lobby in Washington. They have poured billions of dollars into setting up so-called think tanks, spending money in important places, including the Trump family. There is no, basically, secret that there is a lot of money flowing into American businesses from the Gulf states. There was a 19th century philosopher who described the state as the executive committee of the ruling class. The modern version of this could be very well the executive committee of the global oligarchs. So it doesn't matter whether the oligarch is in Manhattan or St. Petersburg or United Arab Emirates or in Riyadh. They also have a direct access in influencing policy and determining policy. Now, why are they obsessed about Iran? Why do they want to attack Iran? And they, again, release new information that has come out, not only from Kerry, that while he was negotiating with the nuclear deal, the Saudis wanted him to attack Iran. And the WikiLeaks actually released one document where the ruler of Saudi Arabia said Iran was a snake, its head should be cut off by the United States. Gates recently revealed that when he went to Riyadh as Secretary of Defense for Obama, he lost his cool in dealing with the Saudi leaders because it was clear that they treated America as mercenaries and they wanted American blood spilled for their interests. And he argued basically that America will go to war when it's in its interest, not in the interest of Riyadh. So here actually it's ironic because Obama was much more of America first than Trump, despite their claims. He was very concerned about if you go to war, it has to be in American interest. Here you have basically Trump beginning to go on a road to war on not really American interest, but Saudi interest, the United Arab Emirates. Now, what is their reason for the opposition? Well, there is a traditional rivalry in the Gulf between Iran and the Saudis. This goes back even under the Shah. But it has become more intense, mainly because after the Iranian Revolution, Khomeini reinterpreted Islam to be anti-monarchical. He even came up with the notion that true Islam had always been against monarchies. Of course, that's bullshit, but this was a new interpretation of the religion. And it didn't go so well with the Saudis, since their actual legitimacy is the monarchy. So this republican versus monarchy fueled the national rivalries. But then added to that are other problems that have actually increased. One is that the US invasion of Iraq unleashed basically sectarian conflicts between Shias and Sunnis. Iran was not actually interested in that game. Iran, before the US invasion of Iraq, didn't push the idea of Shiism versus Sunni. They preferred to talk about Islam. But once the United States broke the state of Iraq and the communal rivalries, conflicts started, became very intense. You basically had ethnic cleansing in Iraq, thanks to the United States. This actually then led to the Saudis beginning to depict Iran as an aggressive Shiite state, threatening the Sunnis in the region, which again is sort of a completely off the wall, because in terms of size of population, state, and power, the Shias are still very much a minority in the region and not in a position to take over the whole of the area. But they talk about the Shiite crescent that's going to reach all the way from Iran to the Mediterranean. Another factor that has fueled this rivalry is, in the past, the Gulf states and the Saudis always acted or pretended to be the main defenders of the Palestinians. Their legitimacy is based on that they're protectors of Islam, they're protectors of the two holy cities, Mecca and Medina, and as Palestinians being predominantly Muslim, they have a duty to protect their smaller brothers. And this, of course, has now become more and more ridiculous, with the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates working very closely with this, not only the United States, with Israel. And this makes them very uncomfortable, because they can no longer present themselves at the forefront of the Arab cause. And this leads the opening for Iran, and this has happened in the last 10 years, to present itself as the main protector of the Palestinians. Iran really can't do much about the Palestinians on the ground, but in terms of appearance and propaganda, Iran has in fact taken that role, that they are at the forefront of protecting the Palestinian cause. And this seems, from the Saudi point of view, basically trespassing on their territory. What are these Iranians doing, interfering with Arab politics? The way to deal with them is you cut off the head because they're a snail, that snake basically trespassing on our territory. So here what you really have is the Saudi policy, especially with the Crown Prince, very aggressively wanting action against Iran, but wanting the United States to take the action. Just my personal view is, if the Saudis really feel threatened by Iran, it's then, okay, they're an independent country, they should then deal with Iran. Why should the United States have to do their dirty work? The same thing could be applied to Israel. If Israel really thinks Iran is an existential threat, they're welcome to deal with it. Why should the United States get involved with it? And one of the major reasons Obama wanted a nuclear agreement was that if there wasn't an agreement, Israel would attack Iran. This would create a chaos. Israel wouldn't be able to solve the problem. That would drag the United States into a war it really didn't want to. The fourth final reason for the pressure are basically a group of neocons, the people who brought us the great success of Iraqi liberation, are now in charge of very much the State Department, and they're fully now manning it with former neocons. And if you go back to their record, and there's no secret because they wrote a lot, there were no secret that their real enemy was in fact Iran. The phrases they used was Baghdad was the road to Tehran, that real men want to go to Tehran, not just to Baghdad, that they were out to destroy the Islamic Republic, and sometimes even more than that. If you look at deconstruct some of their statements, look at some of the maps they distribute about Iran, they see Iran as fragmented into a number of small sectarian mini-states. So their idea is not just the destruction of the Islamic Republic, it's more the destruction of Iran as an entity, because they see Iran as basically a state, a large enough state that could be a problem for the United States. Here, the old explanation would be, of course, it's U.S. imperialism wants to control the Middle East.